Welcome to another episode of Spirit Anointed Leadership. So blessed to have you here. And today is part 5 of the series that we've been in concerning learnings from the Ph.D. And what I did was that I interviewed individuals whose churches were growing going into COVID and coming out of COVID. I wanted to see what we could learn and glean from those churches because I just felt like there was something that we could take from those churches and apply it to our settings. Now, what's interesting is that I interviewed pastors who were leading churches in all different size communities. So they weren't all huge communities, not at all. And I interviewed pastors of all different size churches. So these were not all big churches, not at all. These are pastors who had churches that were growing in the areas of conversion, baptism, discipleship, and attendance rates, both going in and coming out of COVID. And what we learned from those interviews were 6 fascinating things. The first thing we learned is that they were passionate about people coming into a relationship with Jesus Christ through their local church. They really felt like, for lack of a better phrase, the church is the hope of the world. And they wanted to do everything they could to help people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ through their church. Number 2, they understood the strategic importance of their preaching. They wanted to make sure that their preaching helped to set the culture of their church and the fact that lost people matter to God. They wanted to make sure that they were orthodox in their preaching. And finally, they wanted to make sure that they invited people to come into a relationship with Jesus Christ through their preaching. That was really important. The third thing that we learned was the importance of Holy Spirit. How incredibly important Holy Spirit is to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. That we cannot do anything without the Holy Spirit's presence. That's really, really important for us. Another thing that we learned from these pastors is the importance, if you will, of leadership development, that they couldn't just do it all themselves. That leadership was really important, that everything rises and falls on Spirit-anointed leadership. That's why we got the title for this podcast. It's because we just believe that leadership matters. Again, if you look at the Old Testament, just go to the book of Job and go to the left and look at all the times in the Old Testament when a leader made the difference. And by the way, obviously, leaders make a huge difference in the New Testament as well. So everything rises and falls on Spirit-anointed leadership. These leaders of these churches that were growing, going into COVID and coming out of COVID, understood that. They understood the importance of leadership and leadership development. Ephesians 4:11, they wanted to equip people into ministry and release them into ministry, but then they also wanted to develop the leaders around them. They saw that as part of their stewardship responsibility, was to help the leaders around them to develop and become all that God created them to be. So finally now we're on number 5. What was the 5th learning? Well, before I get to that, let me tell you an interesting tidbit that I haven't shared with you yet. The average length of time of the pastors that I interviewed concerning how long they've been at their church was just over 13 years. I found that fascinating because I think it takes a while for pastors to develop the culture of their church, of the church that God has asked them to lead. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And so I just want to encourage some of you, maybe you've been at your church for 6 or 7 years and you're getting frustrated. Maybe not everything is quite like you want it to be yet. That's okay. Just keep getting up every day. Ask the Holy Spirit, what do you want me to hear? And what do you want me to do? Follow the Holy Spirit's guidance and direction and watch what He'll do. These pastors had been at their church for 13 years. They hadn't been there for a year or two. It had taken them time to set the culture and the direction for their church. And they did that through their leadership, through their preaching, and they did it by empowering other people. So that's important. Now, the 5th thing that we learned about these pastors is going to take just a second for me to explain, but I'll kind of cut to the chase and I'll come back and explain it. They were what scholars would call authentic leaders. Now, what in the world is that? Okay, you might think, well, of course, they're just authentic. Well, actually, in the scholarly world, people that actually study the work of leadership, what they do is that they actually have come up with different names or titles of styles of leaders. And back in the late 1990s, there was this huge dearth of character that was being noticed in way too many companies but there were a few people that were actually showing incredible character in Fortune 500 companies. And so those leaders were studied, and what scholars ended up naming those individuals were authentic leaders. Now, authentic leaders are not just people that always tell the truth. Let me tell you, actually, they have 4 different things in common. So if you ask a scholar, tell me about what is an authentic leader, they would tell you 4 things. Number 1, they're self-aware. They're very aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. They don't hide from their weaknesses. They don't pretend they're not there. They're very aware of both their strengths and their weaknesses. Number 2, they have a very strong moral compass. They have a clear sense of what is right and what is wrong, and they want to do what's right. Number 3, they're transparent. They're real. That's, you would probably use the word authentic there. You get what you get with them. They're not trying to hide. They don't have any pretense. They're just real. And number 4, they're open to the ideas of other people. They want feedback. They want people to feel free in the culture of their organization to share their feedback. Now, here's what's interesting. At least I certainly found it interesting, because in my study, we actually did a little bit of some research concerning what leadership style were these pastors that I interviewed. And it came back that most of them were on this scale of being an authentic leader. What I found, however, is that about 70% or so of the pastors that I interviewed, they identified with all 4 of those characteristics. They, quite frankly, were very much self-aware. They had a strong moral compass, no doubt about that. And they were authentic. They were real. People could be around them. They're transparent. They don't try and hide things. They're really transparent. And number 4, they really were open to the ideas of other people. But 30% of them weren't. And here's what I found fascinating about those 30% and why I want to share it with you today. It's because I would tell you that one of the people that I interviewed, they kind of thought that they were the smartest person in the room all the time. They kind of thought that they'd done the research and that they knew what to do and that they were the smartest person in the room. I've got to tell you, that scares me. Whenever I'm around a leader that feels, just kind of puts off this air that they have to be the smartest person in the room, it scares the living willies out of me. It just does, because the organization is going to be limited to their own gifts and abilities and their own thoughts. I don't want that. I just have to tell you, in the organization that I'm blessed to lead, I want the ideas and the opinions of the people around me. There are people around me that have much better ideas than I'm ever going to have. I want those to come to the surface. I want them to be able to share those with me. Man, I'm so blessed to have people that are a lot smarter than I am around me. And I want them to share the ideas that they have about how the organization can go to a whole nother level. If I'm intimidated by that, then the organization is only going to grow to the level of my intimidation. And that's scary. That's not being a good steward at all of the things that God has placed inside of us. So I only interviewed one individual who was really, really committed to being the smartest guy in the room. But the other of those 30% were actually not like that. What they were actually was they were kind of, if you will, if I can use this phrase, they were kind of bipolar in their thoughts. And I don't mean any disrespect for those individuals that actually suffer with bipolarism, not at all. But here's what I'm trying to express. They were very open to people's ideas about how the organization can go to another level. How is it that we can see more people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ? How is it that we can see more people discipled? How is it that we can see more people released into ministry? They were very open to people's ideas about that all day long. What they weren't open to, however, was people who were challenging the mission of the organization. In other words, what they had spent time doing, and oftentimes with a leadership team, they had spent time discerning what is the mission that God has given us as an organization. So, for instance, in this organization that I'm blessed to serve, our mission is to go after the 22 million people who live in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan who don't yet have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And what we want to do is empower and encourage churches and hopefully resource them in any way that we can so that they can go after the mission that God has given them to see more people come to Jesus Christ. That's our mission. Our mission is kind of wrapped up in the verse that Jesus gave us that's recorded in Luke 19:10. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost. That's the mission of the organization. And all I'm saying is that there were these pastors that recognize the mission is not open for debate. And I would say the same thing is true about the Great Lakes region. Our mission is not open for debate. We are after wanting to see as many people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ because we believe that that's the most important mission that we can be on. And we want to invite churches and leaders to go after that mission. We want to do everything we can to equip and empower them to do that. Now, when it comes to how we do that, oh my goodness, we're open to the ideas of other people about how we might do that better. I find myself in conversations all the time with people that say, hey, Chris, what if we did this? Or hey, what if you tried that? I'm open to those ideas. And these pastors were open to ideas when it came to how we do the work of the ministry. They just weren't open to the mission. I got to tell you, there are a lot of great books out there concerning mission and vision. I think one of my favorite ideas was actually shared with me by Jack Lynn, who's on the GLR staff. And Jack might have stolen it from someone else. I don't know. But Jack often reminds us that way back in the 1950s and 60s, NASA had a mission, and their mission is still the same mission. It's basically to explore space. That was their mission. But their vision was, in the 1960s, was to get a man on the moon by the end of the decade. That was their key vision. Their mission was broad. Let's go after this big thing. Let's explore space. But our vision is very, very narrow. It's very specific. So here's what I want to encourage us with. Would the people in our congregations clearly be able to articulate what our mission is? Do they know what our mission is? Do they know that what we're ultimately about as a church? Now, I don't mean this badly, but I think sometimes as leaders, we say, oh, of course they would. Really? I dare you to do something that, matter of fact, I probably don't want you to do because I don't want it to depress you. Just send out a 3x5 card to everyone that's in your congregation this coming weekend and have them write out the mission of your church and see how many different kinds of responses you get. You might be shocked. Now, if you get all the same responses, way to go. You've made that mission really, really clear. What about the vision? Do they know what your short-term goals are, what you're going after right now in this season as a church? Now, you can be open to those things changing over time. Absolutely. Here's the thing. I think if we want to go after people that are far from God and we want to fulfill the Great Commission, if that's what we want to do, and we want to do it in the Holy Spirit's power, Acts 1:8, then I think we have to stick to it for a long period of time. And we can't go running off of this and running after that and running after that. What the pastors of the leaders whose churches were growing understood was our mission has to be simple, and our mission has to be clear, and our mission has to be long. This is not something we're going to accomplish in a day, but we're going to go after it for a long period of time because it's what drives us. It's what compels us. And we're not open to any just winds blowing that might take us off of that mission. So, pastors and leaders, first of all, thank you so much for what you do. Super grateful for you. Can we just commit ourselves to going after the mission that God has given us? And can we say, look, I want to be open to the ideas. Let's not be the smartest person in the room. No, let's be open to the ideas of other people because other people around us have great ideas. Let's make sure that we're mining those ideas, that we're gleaning those ideas from them. Let's ask people continually, hey, how might we accomplish our mission? But let's be crystal clear as we go after that mission that ultimately we want to see as many people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ as possible. That's what joins us. That's what brings us together, is going after that mission. And on that, there's no debate. On that, we're not really open to a whole lot of opinions. Because Jesus had a mission, and he didn't allow anyone to get him off track from that mission. Let's remember that. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today for this episode of Spirit Anointed Leadership. So blessed to have you. Would you do me a favor and subscribe? And then would you share this with someone that you think might benefit from it? Would you follow, please? That would be a huge blessing. And finally, let's be Spirit-anointed leaders that are authentic. Hey, let's make sure when it comes down to it that we're self-aware. Let's make sure that we have a strong moral compass. Let's make sure that we're transparent. And let's make sure that we're open to the ideas of other people, as long as it doesn't have to do with our core mission. I love you. Have a great day.